Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna.
Hari Om. Hari Om. Let's get started. Invocation.
Sahana vavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. गीता ध्यानम। ओम पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणी भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्ब त्वामनुसन्धतामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्रा येन त्वया भारततैल्यपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवैत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरननडे कैवर्तककेशवा पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम्। लोके सज्जनषट्परैरहरहः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् भारतपङ्कजं कलिमला प्रध्वंसिन श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदे साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगा ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः
Hari Om. So we are in the middle of chapter 2 and entering a very interesting, a very divine portion of chapter 2. Actually, every verse of the Bhagavad Gita is divine, every chapter is divine. But I guess, based on our personal inclinations, we like some verses, we like some of them more than we like the others. So I may say that for me, we are entering something which is very, very appealing, very divine. So what we saw in chapter 2 was that it is primarily divided into 3 sections. The first section is up to verse 8, leading up to Arjuna's surrender to Bhagavan Sri Krishna, where he submits to him and seeks guidance and asks for guidance. And then section 2, which essentially consists of the logic or reasoning by which one comprehends the true nature of the self or the absolute reality. This section is called Sankhya, and it is from verse 11 to verse 37. Through this knowledge of Sankhya, one eliminates all the sorrows that come or that emerge from attachment, grief, and so on. We saw that Arjuna is in a situation or in a state where he feels immense attachment even for the enemy. And through that comes the grief. And this part of the learning or Bhagavan's teaching helps us eliminate all those difficulties, all those sorrows that come from attachment and grief and so on. Now this part is further divided into 2 further subsections, and that deals with Atma Vidya, which is firstly the nature of the self and the body. This is from verse 11 to verse 30. And this learning or this teaching removes Atma Moha, which is nothing but delusion regarding one's own nature. We typically identify ourselves with our own body, mind, and intellect paradigm, and that leads to a lot of delusions. And this section helps us remove that delusion by providing Atma Vidya or the knowledge of the self. The second subsection is what deals with Swadharma Vidya, or that pertaining to the nature of the individual's duty. And this is from verse 31 to 37. And this removes Swadharma Moha, or any delusion that is pertaining to performance of duty. And that happens by giving off Swadharma Jnana, or knowledge pertaining to one's duty. We have actually covered up till here. And this is from verse 31 to 37. But we have also covered verse 38. And verse 38 is nothing but an instruction to maintain equipoise from Bhagavan. And going forward, we will see that from verse 39 onwards, or you can say from verse 38 onwards, it consists of the technique to attain this wisdom, or the yoga. This is called yoga. And this is from verse 38 to 72, which is the end of the chapter. And through this, one attains perfection in action and equipoise under extremities. That is what one is able to attain through this. So we saw in verse 38, what did Bhagavan say? Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labhau jaya jayau tato yuddhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsyasi. So Bhagavan is saying that whether you are going through happiness or sadness, whether you are going through victory or defeat, whether you are going through profit or loss, in all these extremities, maintain semblance of equipoise, maintain a mind that is tranquil. And when you do that, and with that tranquil mind, with that equipoise, you deal with the challenges that the world throws at you, you will not incur any sin. And what we saw, sin is nothing but the mental disturbances that occur within us. And when we deal with extremities with equipoise, then those mental disturbances do not come about and help us deal with the world in a much better way. So the section that primarily deals with Atma Vidya, the initial section 2, is called Sankhya Yoga. And the section that primarily deals with action perfection, which is what we are going to go through now, is called Buddhi Yoga. And Bhagavan will explain why he calls it Buddhi Yoga. Now, Buddhi Yoga, why? Because karma is action. And karma done with a particular buddhi, which is nothing but attitude. Any karma that is done with a particular buddhi, that correction in attitude, that changes the quality of the action. So a positive attitude will result in positive action. A negative attitude will result in negative action. The nature of the action is altered by the buddhi that is there or the attitude that is there while performing that action. And when you do Buddhi Yoga, which we'll come to, we'll talk about what Buddhi Yoga is. When we perform or when we do action with that kind of an attitude, it becomes a preparation to get spiritual knowledge, which Bhagavan is imparting. So we saw that Arjuna surrenders the first section, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhavaha prichhami tvam dharma sammuda cheta yachre yashyat nishchitam bruhitan me shishyasteham shadhimam tvam prapannam. So here Arjuna says, my nature, my svabhava has been pahata, obliterated by what? By self-pity, karpanya. And because of which my mind is confused about my duty. And with this, in this situation where my nature has been almost destroyed, where my mind is confused about my duty, where I don't know what my identity is, Atma Moha, and I don't know, my mind is confused about my duty, Swadharma Moha. That is what Arjuna says. I have both Atma Moha and I have Swadharma Moha. So Bhagavan, I am asking you. So what is Nishchitam? Permanently, for long lasting, Shreya, what is good for me? Please guide me, please tell me. Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. I am your student, I am your Sishya. Please instruct me, I surrender to thee. And then Sri Bhagavan in verse 11, he starts. We started with Sri Bhagavanu Vacha. And there we talked about what Bhagavan stands for, Bhagavan. I would encourage all of you to go back and revise it once more. And he says, Ashocyan anvashochastvam pragyam vadamscha bhashase gatasun agatasunscha nanusho pandita. So he calls Arjuna Pandita, which means you are a wise person. But what are you doing, you wise person? You have grieved for what ought not to be grieved. You are grieving for what ought not to be grieved. And yet you are speaking words of wisdom. You are lecturing me on, the way of life, while grieving for what not ought to be grieved. But the wise people, they do not grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. This is how he starts his teaching. And why is it that people grieve? They grieve because they do not have knowledge. They lack in knowledge because they are ignorant. The wise people transcend sorrow through knowledge. When you find out about a situation which is giving you sorrow, when you go above that situation, you transcend it through that knowledge, and that knowledge helps you get over that particular sorrow. But what did Arjuna do in order for him to learn? He first had to admit that he is ignorant. That is the first step. If we do not admit, if we do not think that we are ignorant, learning never starts. The best example is my own personal example that I can share with you. I was a student of economics and struggled through learning economics through all my college life. The reason is, first of all, I don't know if inherently I was fond of the subject. Like last time I told you that math as a subject never excited me, and I used to wonder, how my brother was so excited about math. Similarly, economics as a subject, forget about exciting. I would say it did excite me a bit, but I was always challenging. I thought I knew. And when you think you know, you start questioning. For example, when you read Perfect Equilibrium in economics, I said, what is this concept of perfect equilibrium? It doesn't make any sense. Show me perfect equilibrium in the real world. There's nothing called perfect equilibrium. And when you start arguing against what is being taught, then you are not admitting to your ignorance. I was a first year student or a second year student arguing against a well-established subject that has been in vogue and that is driving economies for, decades, if not centuries, but definitely decades, because economics also changes. And I was arguing the concept of, what I was being taught, like, for example, perfect equilibrium. So when you have that attitude of thinking that learning does not take place. And obviously I struggled through my undergraduate program. So Sri Bhagavan, he is looking at Arjuna, he is looking at his body language. Arjuna is listening, he's a very attentive student, but the body language is not indicating any kind of learning that is taking place. A lot of listening, yes, but lot of doubt, lot of lack of clarity, lot of questions, no conviction on the part of the student. Exactly like I was in my undergrad stage, no conviction. And the teacher is able to see that. I was not as lucky to get a teacher like Sri Krishna. And he catches Arjuna is not learning. And now he moves forward and says that, let me try and help you learn. How? By converting the theory into practice. By converting what you are listening to me as information into knowledge. And we will see how he does that. We go to verse 39.
Esha te bihita sankhye
Esha te bihita sankhye
buddhir yogi tvimam shrunu
buddhir yoge tvimam shrunu
buddhaya yukto yaya partha
buddhya yukto yaya partha
karma bandham prahasyasi
karma bandham prahasyasi.
Esha te bihita sankhye buddhir yogi tvimam shrunu buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi.
Esha te bihita. Esha means this. Abhihita. Ahibhita means what I have covered so far. What has been covered so far. What has been taught to you so far. And what is that has been taught so far? Sankhya Buddhi, which is knowledge pertaining to Sankhya. So Sankhya comes from the word Sankhya. Sankhya means number. But in this case, in this context, Sankhya means Samyat Khyayate Anaya Iti Sankhya. Anaya means by which. Samyat, very well. Khyayate, explained. So that which explains very well is Sankhya. Explains what? Anything, economics, for example, when I was a student. So something that explains economics very well is Sankhya with respect to economics. Here we are studying what? Here we are studying Atma Vidya. So something that explains Atma Vidya very well is Sankhya. In this context, Sankhya is something that explains very well. Explains what? Atma Vidya. Now, what explains Atma Vidya really well? It's our scriptures, Upanishads. So, from that context, Sankhya is Upanishad. Sankhya is also number, and Sankhya is also Upanishad. And what is explained in the Upanishad? The Atman, the Brahman, which means the self and the divine. That is what is explained in the Upanishads. And that which is explained in the Upanishads, that which is explained by Sankhya is Sankhya, which is what God has taught till now. So, up until now, Bhagavan says, I have explained to you Sankhya through giving you Atma Vidya. But you can also see that Arjuna is listening, getting a lot of information, but he is not really getting it. And he is finding it hard to follow. And Bhagavan, having realized that, he says, whatever you have grasped till now looks like it's only information for you. For example, when we say Mount Everest is the tallest, mountain in this planet, tallest earth feature in this planet, that is information for all of us. Okay, that is nothing but information, but we treat it as knowledge. Why do we treat it as knowledge? Because this information can be verified from a trusted source to be correct. That is why we treat this information, a trustworthy source, and if we are able to verify it, we take it as knowledge. And taking this reasoning even further, if we actually experience it. For example, if you go on top and stand on top of the Mount Everest and see that, yes, it is indeed the tallest feature all around. Not only that, we have got an altimeter in our watch or in our phone, and that shows us that, this is the height of that feature. And I've also climbed a few other tall mountains, and I know that this is the tallest that I've climbed. Then not only have I verified it from a trustworthy source, I have actually experienced it. And that is direct knowledge. So when the means of information, from where we get the information, is perfect, it becomes knowledge. And when the means of knowledge is perfect, it becomes direct knowledge, or you can even call it wisdom. So we can say that information pending discovery is knowledge. In Sanskrit, this is termed as Paroksha Jnana. Paroksha, P-A-R-O-K-S-H-A, Paroksha Jnana. Paroksha Jnana means something that is information pending discovery, or knowledge pending establishment or experience. And when that knowledge is established through discovery, then it becomes direct knowledge, or Aparoksha Jnana. Now, Paroksha Jnana is Paro plus Aksha. Paro means other than. Aksha means eyes. So anything other than what my eyes has seen, anything that I have learned from indirect resources, that is Paroksha. And Aparoksha is A plus Paroksha. Anything that I have experienced or seen directly is my direct knowledge. So Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda relates a beautiful story to explain this. So the other day I talked to you about electricity. There is charge all around us. There is electricity all around us, right? So my friend asks me, where is it, the charge? I don't feel any charge. I say, no, it's there. Sometimes we know that there is electricity. We have read it in our physics books. He said, yeah, we have read it in our physics book, but where is this charge? I don't see it. I don't sense it. Then I tell him that, look, if you take a plastic paper and rub it on your hand, and you have hair in your hand and it will stand, that is charge. Yeah, that's plastic, that is hair, it's standing. Where is the charge? I don't see the charge. And you see the light bulb, it's burning. That burns because of that electricity, because of that charge. But the light bulb is burning. Where is the electricity? I can see light, yes, but I don't see the electricity. So I'm getting irritated here. I say, and then he's intelligent also. He says, look at this bulb which is not burning. Where is the electricity in this bulb which is not connected to the source? He says, there's no electricity here. How come there is electricity there? I don't understand this. So then I say, okay, I'll teach you where electricity is. For that, you have to do electricity yoga. Okay, so this is a new form of yoga. and we'll do that yoga. So I said, step by step, please follow my instructions. So he's very eager student. He wants to learn. So he's step by steps, he follows my instructions. Okay. So I say, pick up that stool. He picks it up. Okay. Put it under that bulb. He puts it under the bulb. I say, stand on the stool. That is step 3. He stands on the stool. Go back, twist it and remove the bulb. He twists it and removes the bulb. And he says, yeah, see, there's no electricity. I told you this is not burning. I said, that's fine. Okay. Don't worry about it. I'll show you electricity. Then I said, just fist your hand. He fists his hand. That is next. Then I said, take your index finger and point it, like this. Put your hand like this. He does that. I said, put your finger where the bulb was. He puts it where the bulb was. And the next second, there's a jolt and he's fallen on the ground out of the stool. The stool goes somewhere else. And this guy is falling, shuddering, shivering. Takes him about 5 minutes to come back. And when he comes to his senses and he's looking at me, and I see there is direct knowledge. So he's actually experienced that electricity. Till then he was arguing with me about what, like an economics student, I was saying, what is perfect equilibrium? Show me perfect equilibrium. So what has he done now? He has actually experienced that electricity, that jolt. Luckily for him, it was indirect current. If it was direct current, he would have got nicely joined with that source completely. He would have achieved, ultimate reality. But it was indirect current. So he lives to say that, yes, I have experienced this thing called electricity. But looking at that, glow in his face, that glow of experience. Now, I have never experienced electricity. I only believe my, paroksha jnana. I have just trustworthy source. I have read it in nice physics book. Now looking at him, I say, oh man, this guy is experienced. I should also experience. The only way to experience is to get that 220 volt jolt, right? So paroksha jnana is something that you have not seen yourself directly. You have not experienced yourself directly, but you have heard about it and you trust it. Aparoksha jnana is something which you have directly experienced. And now Bhagavan says, Tvimam Shrinu, listen to me. Tvimam. Tvimam is 2 plus imam, which is, but this you listen. And what? Listen to what? Buddhir yoge. The buddhi that is pertaining to yoga, which will lead to direct knowledge. This electricity yoga, like that, you'll do other yogas, which will then lead to direct knowledge. Till now, it was Sankhya Buddhi. Now it is Yoga Buddhi. Now this placement of this word in the verse, in between, if you notice in the verse, where is this word Buddhi? Esha te bihita Sankhya Buddhir yoge. Sankhya Buddhir yoge. So this placement of this word Buddhi is right in between Sankhya and Buddha. That is a very interesting placement. It implies that the word Buddhi goes with both Sankhya and with Yoga. It is like if there is a bulb on the threshold of my house, and when I switch on that light, which is on the threshold of my house, it lights up both the inside and the outside. So it lights up the veranda and it lights up the room which is right next to the front main door. So similarly, it's called Deheli Deepak Gyaya. Deheli doesn't mean Delhi. Deheli means threshold. Deepa is light. Gyaya means give. In this case, in our context, Deepa means knowledge. So this Buddhi, which is right in the threshold of Sankhya and Yoga, it refers to both Sankhya Buddhi and Yoga Buddhi. And it lights up, it gives knowledge of both Sankhya and Yoga. So it's something like, if let's say an architect is conceived of an edifice. An edifice is nothing but a building. So when he is conceiving, or when it is there in his mind, it is the ideal thing in his mind. It's an ideal in his mind. And then he draws it on the drawing board in his architectural drawing. He explains it to us. And when he starts talking about it, painting a picture about it, shows a drawing, then it becomes a theory. The ideal becomes a theory. And then the building starts coming up. And after some time, it is done completely. And once it is done, it is something which is real. So exactly like that in this process, Sankhya is the ideal becoming theory, and yoga is the theory becoming a practical existence, a real shape. And now Bhagavan says that I will start with Yoga Buddhi, imparting you Buddhir Yoge Tvamam Shrunu. Please listen. And there are over 82 in our scriptures. When you go through the Upanishads, there are over 80 plus 82 plus yogas that are there, different kinds of yogas. Now, what is yoga? Yoga is nothing but turning one's attention to the higher while handling the current with equanimity. So even when the most common yoga reference is to what? Is to the Ashtanga yoga, or the physical various forms of yoga, right? There, if you have to do, let's say, for example, Sri Shasana, where you have to, normally we stand in our foot, but you have to stand on your head, ulta, okay? Opposite. If you have to stand on your head, you go from step by step, like I talked about electricity yoga. So you first take a crouching step, then you bring your feet towards your hand, then you slowly take your feet out, and then you start slowly extending it, and so on and so forth, right? So, but each of these steps, what are you doing? While maintaining the current position in a very stable manner. The minute your current position becomes unstable, the ultimate position will not come. To get the ultimate asana, you have to, every step has to have that stability. So the ultimate asana is the higher asana. Turning one's attention to the higher while maintaining stability or equipoise in the current is yoga. In anything, whether it is an asana or whether it is anything else. So turning the attention to the higher plus handling the current with equanimity is equal to yoga. And Buddhi Yoga, we have studied earlier, is, we have said that what do you do? When you do karma, it is plain karma. How do you convert that karma into karma yoga? Karma yoga, Buddhi Yoga is another term for karma yoga. Okay? How do you convert the karma into karma yoga? You do the same karma with two attitudes. The first attitude is Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. Ishwar, Lord, Arpana, offering, Buddhi, attitude. So when you do something with the attitude of offering it to the Lord, and last time when we talked about it, I gave the example of Federer. The ideal for Federer is the game of tennis. Any higher ideal, that is your God. So in a way, Federer's God is the game of tennis. I'm sure he has other gods, or he may have or may not have. But when you dedicate something to the higher ideal, that is Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. And whenever you do karma, whenever you take some action, then there is some result to it, right? You get something else in return that you accept with equanimity. That is called Prasada Buddhi. Prasada means equanimity. So dedicate all actions to the higher ideal, to the Lord, and receive whatever comes your way with the attitude of equanimity or prasada. That is called Buddhi Yoga. And this higher ideal is for example, the national flag is not the nation. The nation is the higher ideal. The national flag is an idol that symbolizes the higher ideal. Similarly, the wedding ring is not the wife. The wife is the higher ideal. The wedding ring symbolizes the marriage. The wedding ring is not the marriage or the spouse. That is the higher ideal. But the wedding ring is a symbol or an idol that symbolizes the higher ideal. So, in fact, when we do idol worship, every idol is a symbol for a higher ideal. So, when you have a higher ideal in life, you are able to do your karma as karma yoga. And that attitude makes it Buddhi Yoga. So, Sri Krishna now says, Tvamam Shrinu. And why should you listen? Because Buddhya Yukto Yaya Partha. Yukto means equipped. Yaya, with this, Buddhya, knowledge. equipped with this knowledge, O Partha, karma bandham prahasyasi. Karma bandham. The bandha means the bondage. The bondage that comes from karma is karma bandha. Prahasyasi. It will be destroyed. There will not be any bondage that comes through karma. You will be able to put an end to, prahasyasi means putting an end to. You will be able to put an end to any bondage that has come about through your past karmas. All that will go away. So in our world of software engineering, when you build products through using software technology, oftentimes you have poor quality of code. Okay. So for example, there was this brand new aircraft, let's call it the new version of Airbus. Airbus A380 is standing there in the tarmac. It is till now, it has been inside the hangar, the work, the factory, the building of the aircraft has happened. And this Airbus A380 is going to take for the first time in its life, this aircraft is going to take off, get off the ground. Okay, and Airbus is very proud of that. It's a big achievement. So Airbus, the entire aircraft is made through lots of parts. There is an engine, there is metal that is making various parts, there is plastic, there are the guys who supplied the seats, there are the people who supplied the various consoles inside the cockpit, the air conditioning guys, the toilet guys, all in sundry. The cartons where you keep your food, all of that, right? So Airbus has obviously sourced all of this through various corporations, various companies. So for this test flight, Airbus says, Airbus 380, great aircraft, let's invite all the CEOs of these companies for our inaugural test flight. So all of them come, there is a big party inside the plane, a lot of food and eatables and enjoyment and merriment. It's a celebration occasion all the same, right? And then the pilot comes on and says, gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much for coming on this special occasion. We are now going to take off. This is the first ever flight this aircraft is going to take. And then the CEOs, one by one, they start saying, hey, you never told us that. I don't have time. I just came for this 2 hours of celebration. So one of them gets out, the second one gets out, the third one gets out, one excuse or the other. All the CEOs get out. Who wants to be there on the first ever test flight of a plane? That looks so massive as if it can't even take off from the ground. So, they give some excuse or the other, everybody gets out. There's only one guy sitting. And the captain comes to this one guy and says, sir, you are not getting out. Everyone has left, all CEOs. Are you okay? Can you please come and join us on this test flight? Yeah, sure. I'm here. I'm very comfortable. I'll be happy to be there. Okay. He says, how come? You're not scared? Because all of them appear to be very scared. So he says, don't worry. I am the software CEO. Your plane runs on my software. I know it's not going to take off. So this poor quality of code, that often, causes, the code not to function properly. Exactly like that, our mind, and why is this poor quality? What is poor quality? Poor quality means code that is not written properly, which means code that is impure, which is not pure. Similarly, our mind has impurities, okay? And those impurities are the ones that lead to what? Karma bandha. So the karma bandha is a result of poor quality of mind coming through impurities, exactly like a software code. And that is nothing but chitta ashuddhi. Chitta is mind. We have seen this earlier. Ashuddhi means poor quality. So chitta ashuddhi leads to karma bandha. And what do we seek as human beings? We seek to remove, exactly like a quality team seeks to remove the poor quality. How do you remove poor quality? By replacing it with good quality. Right? The good has to replace the bad. Similarly, if we can remove the impurities in the mind, then chitta ashuddhi becomes what? Chitta shuddhi. Remember, we saw this earlier. Chitta ashuddhi is nothing but disturbances in the mind, impurities of the mind, which causes disturbances, which is sin. And by removing these impurities, the sin is replaced by merit. The papa is replaced by punya. The disturbances is replaced by equanimity or chitta shuddhi. So how do you do that? So Bhagavan will tell us now, okay? And essentially what he says is that a mind that seeks self-fulfillment, a mind that approaches any action with a thought of selfishness, a mind that seeks joy to satisfy itself, that mind remains unpure. But in order to convert the impurity, the Chitta Shuddhi to Chitta Shuddhi, you have to have the attitude of not seeking joy. And when you do that, then the impurities go away. The punya and the papa destroy each other basically, right? So essentially you use the punya or you use the merit to destroy the sin. The right attitude while performing the action. What is the right attitude? Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, Prasada Buddhi. That right attitude releases a person, that person who is performing with that attitude, from the bondage of karma or bondage of action, and leads to purity of the mind and the intellect. Now, punya can function as two elements. Punya can either be a papa destroying power, which is that the merit can remove the sin, the equanimity can remove the disturbance, the equanimity destroys the disturbance, so it becomes a papa destroying power, or it is a joy purchasing power. So when you do it, any action with selfish reasons or selfish motive, it becomes a joy purchasing power. So as much as you spend your money to buy something that gives you, let's say I go and spend my money, buy ice cream, enjoy that ice cream, feel damn good, really good about it, love the taste, love the feeling, love the texture, and that gives me a lot of joy. My money is spent, gone. Similarly, when you do karma with the attitude to receive joy, the karma, the punya is spent, goes away. But when you do perform a karma with an attitude not thinking about selfish joy, that karma stays and helps the mind gain equanimity. It stays within, it stays inside. And when it stays inside, the papa gets destroyed. When the papa gets destroyed, the mind becomes stable. The mind becomes equanimous. It is not expended to achieve something. Now, the mind essentially has two types of impurities. This is quite beautiful. I would request all of you to pay attention, as much as possible, write down, but anyway, I send you the notes later, okay? So the two types of impurities are, type 1 are reactions to environmental disturbances. Disturbances that are happening outside us, we react to it. We react to it how? There is agitation, there is restlessness, there is lack of focus, there is lack of concentration, there is lack of alertness. All these are type 1 impurities or disturbances that come through our responding or reacting. Actually reacting, responding is not the right word. Reacting to external disturbances. Type 2 impurities are those that come from within. They don't need external disturbances. Our own mind throwing up negative thoughts. And then our own mind throwing up negative thoughts then propagate into the environment. That sully our mental peace and also sully the environment around us. Those are the type 2 impurities. These type 2 impurities are classified as Shadripu, or 6 imperfections or 6 enemies of the mind. These are, number 1, kama. Kama means desire. And the more the desire that is driven by selfish reason, the more the desire that is driven by a sense of incompleteness within. Because we feel incomplete, we desire something else. And that incompleteness leading to that desire is kama. And the more incompleteness, more kama. The second one is krodha. Krodha is anger. The third is lobha. Lobha means greed. And the fourth is moha, delusion. We have spoken so much about delusion. And delusion is also usually combined, if it gets combined with emotional attachment, like in Arjuna's case, he's deluded and he gets emotion, he feels that sense of emotional attachment towards the enemy. Then it becomes more deeper. moha. Madha. Madha means pride, or it also means arrogance, hubris. That is madha. And the last or the sixth one is matsarya. Matsarya means jealousy or envy. So desire, anger, greed, delusion, pride or arrogance, and jealousy or envy. These are the 6 imperfections of the human mind which cause the mind to become impure. And when these impurities are there in the mind, and the mind is possessed by these impurities, not just, the degree also causes a lot of result. So the impurities being there in the mind, the impurities coming and going, impurities being there, and the mind being possessed by these impurities. When the mind is possessed by these impurities, knowledge cannot become direct knowledge or wisdom. That step, transformation of paroksha jnana to aparoksha jnana, cannot happen. It never happens. And the method to remove these impurities is through Buddhi Yoga. But to understand what Buddhi Yoga does, or to understand what Karma Yoga does, we have to first understand what is karma. Okay? Karma is what? Action. And what does karma do is what we need to understand. So what does karma do? Karma can be either good or bad, or can be so-so. Okay? Good, bad, so-so. Right? And like seeds, when you put a seed, plant a seed in the ground, it takes time to germinate, and after that it takes time to shoot up, and then it takes time to become a plant or a tree or whatever it may be. Right? Similarly, action takes time to germinate. The result is not immediate. There is an immediate result and there is an ultimate result. So the immediate result of a good action is good result. And the ultimate result of a good action is happiness. The immediate result of a bad action is some kind of a bad result. And the ultimate result of a bad action is unhappiness. So this intermediate result, or the immediate result, or the intermediate result of good or bad action is either punya or papa. And oftentimes the intermediate result or the immediate result, it is unseen. You don't see it. That is called, in Sanskrit, it is termed as adrishtaya. And the final result is seen. It's very obvious when you see a happy person. It's very obvious when you see a sad person or a person in sorrow. That is drishtaya. So the drishtaya papa punya or adrishtaya papa punya. And how do we come about these papa and punya? Based on the attitude or based on the sankalpa while performing the action. In Sanskrit, it is called sankalpa. What is my mental makeup? What is my statement of purpose while performing that action? What is my motive for performing that action? Based on that, action becomes either karma or karma yoga. And the result changes to good or bad. When the motive of doing karma yoga is not for one's own happiness, and the selfishness is given away, and there is no attachment to result, then there is no anxiety. So for example, when Nadal or Federer are playing that game, if they are worried about the result of that game, then there is anxiety. That anxiety causes them to lose the match. The result of the anxiety about the result of the match causes them to lose the set. Anxiety of the result of the set causes them to lose the tournament. So this anxiety is not there when the selfishness or the worry about the result goes away. The worry about the result is what causes anxiety. The resultant punya, that is done, that comes from Buddhi Yoga, that removes the 6 Shadripu or the 6 imperfections. And when that happens, the person becomes what is called as Viveka Yukta. Viveka is what? The first of the Samadhi Shakta Sampattis, which is nothing but discriminative ability between the permanent and the ephemeral, the Nitya and the Anitya. So a person who has this equanimity, who has this intellect and mind that is reached that equilibrium, becomes Viveka Yukta. which means the person is easily able to distinguish between what is permanent, good for that person. Nishchitam bruhitan me. Nishchitam shreya. The nishchitam shreya, what is permanently long-term good for you. The person is able to distinguish between that and the anitya, what is ephemeral, what just comes and goes. And this results in equipoise. And when that equipoise comes, the individual becomes an observer of the joys and of the happiness, of all that takes place as a result of the actions. The person is aware, but not attached. I call this detached involvement. When you're able to be involved with everything that's going on, okay, you have to live in this world. You have to do what you have to do. You have to be involved. Arjuna has to fight that arrow which will kill Bhishma. But while he's involved, he is detached. In that extreme example of Arjuna killing Bhishma, okay, in our day-to-day life also, this detached involvement is required. So the combination of a pure mind and a perfect intellect results in knowledge becoming direct knowledge or wisdom, which is aparoksha jnana. So this is what Bhagavan is going to show us. With that, we move to verse 40.
Neha Bikramana
Neha Bikramana Shosti
Pratyavayo na vidyate
Pratyavayo na vidyate
Swalpamapyasya dharmasya
Svalpamapyasya dharmasya
Trayate mahato bhayat
Trayate mahato bhayat
Neha Bikramana Pratyavayo na vidyate Swalpamapyasya dharmasya Trayate mahato bhayat.
Neha Bhikrama Nashosti. That is essentially na iha abhikrama nasha asti. Na means not. Iha, here. Here where in Buddhi Yoga. Abhikrama, immediate result of karma. Immediate karma means sequence. Something that immediately follows the karma. Abhikrama. Nasha, loss or destruction. Asti is there. Is there meaning it's not there. Not. Remember the first word, na. Is not there. So, Abhikrama is the crucial word in this verse. Abhikrama is nothing but abhikarmyate. Abhikarmyate iti abhikrama. That which begins immediately after, in sequence. That is abhikrama. Immediate result. We just saw, I just explained action, immediate result, long-term result. Good action, immediate result, punya, long-term result, happiness. Bad action, immediate result, papa, long-term result, unhappiness. So the immediate result of good action, punya, or bad action, papa, the intermediate action, that is what we are talking about here. And when Buddhi Yoga is performed, Buddhi Yoga, yoga action with the attitude of Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi. When Buddhi Yoga is performed, this punya, that is the punya, is not expended to purchase joy. It does not become a joy purchasing power. It becomes a papa destroying power. It does not get expended. It is not lost. Nasha asti. Nasha na asti. So it does not get lost. Pratyavayo. Pratyavayo means the defect due to incorrect or incomplete or improper action. And when you do an action that is either not exactly as defined, okay, or is incomplete. And Bhagavan says, when you do it, any action with the attitude, Buddhi Yoga attitude, Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, Prasada Buddhi attitude, this Pratyavayo defect is not there. So, in in karma, there are two possible defects. They are called karma nasha. The two possible defects of karma nasha are the sequence of operating must be followed in lot of actions. If the correct sequence is not followed, then there is a defect. For example, if you are planting seeds, it germinates, comes a shoot, becomes a plant, becomes a flower, yields fruits, and you don't harvest it. Then what happens? All the previous action also goes to waste. Because what? That sequence of harvesting is not followed. Okay? Or if you have not put urea, then maybe the fruit itself will not come. The sequence of action is not followed. Or in elections, can people, what do? They canvass, and then there is voting, then there is election, then there is result. Will a candidate start canvassing after the result? Imagine a candidate starting to canvass after the result. Rahul Gandhi may do that, right? So how will he win the election then? Right? So if action is not done in the sequence that is prescribed. The second thing is, if action is not done exactly as defined, then it can rebound. For example, when a bomb is being diffused by a bomb diffuser, one of you would have seen in lots of movies, the cable where it gets connected or disconnected is extremely important. If you don't do it exactly as prescribed, the bomb will blow on his face. Okay, one of the things that we used to do in the army, I was in the regiment which fired guns, howitzer guns, where the shell goes 20, 30, 40 kilometers. Okay, there is a risk. So we are supporting the infantry. Infantry are people who are fighting with the enemy infantry. They are face to face. Artillery or howitzer guns come from 30 kilometers away and falls in the enemy. One small mistake in the angle of elevation, okay, or in the force with which you need to fire, the amount of propellant that needs to go. One little bit error, a degree of error, can cause the shell to fall on your troops and not on the enemy troops, leading in self-casualty. My own team dies, okay? So it is extremely, extremely important, what is the elevation, what is the angle, what is the propellant, which propellant do you use, how much do you use, all that is extremely critical. So you have to check and recheck and check and recheck. Everything is checked again and again and again and again. There's a checklist manifesto. There's actually a book called Checklist Manifesto by Dr. Atul Gawande. I'll recommend everybody in this world to read that book. It's a beautiful book that enables you to perform better in whatever you are doing. What does that book essentially say? Keep a checklist, follow that checklist with discipline. So if we didn't follow that checklist when we were firing those shells, then there is a risk of your own troops, getting killed. So the exact manner in which something has to be done, the exact sequence in which something has to be done is extremely important for karma yoga. If that is not done, it can lead to karma nasha. So these two weaknesses, God is saying, these weaknesses are not there in Buddhi Yoga. So when you obey, when you know the law, it is knowledge. But when you obey the law, it is wisdom. So when you implicitly obey the checklist manifesto, it's wisdom. And that is Buddhi Yoga. And when you do that, karma nasha does not happen. And then he says, Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. So even api means even a little, swalpam, very little of this, of what? Of Buddhi Yoga, of Karma Yoga. Even very little of this Buddhi Yoga, dharmasya here stands for Buddhi Yoga. It protects. Trayate means protects. Mahato, from fear, bhayat. So even a little bit of this Buddhi Yoga, done even for a short period of time, helps remove the fear that is attached to realizing the benefit. So that is what Bhagavan is trying to say in this verse. We will now move to the next verse.
Vyavasayatmika buddhir
Vyavasayatmika buddhir
ekeha kuru nandana
Ekeha kuru nandana
बहुशाखाह्यनन्ताश्च
बहुशाखाह्यनन्ताश्च
बुद्धयो व्यवसायिनाम्
बुद्धयो व्यवसायिनाम्
व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिर् एकेह कुरु नन्दन बहुशाखाह्यनन्ताश्च बुद्धयो व्यवसायिनाम्.
Ekeha Kurunandana. Kurunandana he is the descendant of the Kurus. In this case, Nandana, the joy of the Kurus. Remember in Gita Dhyanam, we see Krishna as the joy of Devaki, the mother. Here, Krishna refers to Arjuna as the joy of the Kurus, Kurunandana. Ekeha Kurunandana. Ekeha means where? Here, in Buddhi Yoga. Here is in Buddhi Yoga. There is what? In Buddhi Yoga, there is Vyavasayatmika. Vyavasayatmika means single pointed. Vyavasayatmika, single pointed what? Buddhi. In here, that refers to determination. Single pointed determination. So to follow that checklist manifesto, to do things perfectly again and again and again, you need this Ekeha Vyavasayatmika Buddhi. So Bhagavan says that in this Buddhi Yoga, there is single pointed determination. So the mind and the intellect instruments, they are focused. They are determinate. Determinate means focused, single pointed. They are not carried away. Carried away by what? By wants and desires. When you are in that battlefield firing, determining how much propellant needs to go, what should be the angle. Imagine you are thinking about, the mess and that glass of wine or whiskey, or going on a picnic. You can't afford to do that. So the mind is not carried away by wants or wishes. It is single pointedly focusing on what karma or action that you are doing. And that is because that Buddhi Yoga is performed as a worship. What? Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. That is nothing but worship. Attitude of devoting your work to the higher ideal. That higher ideal is extremely important. Nadal's tennis game, Federer's tennis game, and without any expectations of the accruing benefit, Prasada Buddhi. So this will keep coming again and again, or we should keep remembering it again and again. Because every time we do an action, we need to do it with Ishvara Arpana Buddhi and Prasada Buddhi. Okay? And when this duty is performed as a worship, without any expectations, and with complete acceptance, that is called Buddhi Yoga. And when this Buddhi Yoga is there, there is Vyavasayatmika, determinate, single-pointed focus is the result. So once I was on this long flight, and I was, you look at these movies or, the in-flight entertainment, right? I was listening to the interview by Ayrton Senna. Ayrton Senna was one of the world Formula One champions. Okay. And Ayrton Senna, the interviewer was asking Ayrton Senna about how is it that he is able to win again and again. The Formula One race is extremely stressful. You are going at extremely high speeds and you are competing. There are other great racers and there are some close shaves, close calls, there are accidents. And he asked Ayrton Senna, how do you keep doing this again and again and again and again, winning again and again and again and again? So Ayrton Senna says, I was blown away by his answer, okay? He says, you see the video of, you see the filming of the Formula One race? The interviewer says, yes, of course I do. I love it. He said, do you see these tunnels that we pass through? Especially in Monaco, you will see a lot of these tunnels that the racing car goes through. He says, yeah, I see those tunnels. He says, for me, Ayrton is saying this, Ayrton Senna. He says, for me, the tunnel is once I sit in my cockpit. Once I'm behind the steering wheel, once I've got my cockpit and put my helmet on, that's my tunnel. Vyavasayatmika, determinate, focused, into it. He's in a tunnel. He doesn't see any distraction. His mind is not anywhere. Another beautiful story that I read. When Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister of India, he was operated for his heart ailment. Okay, sitting Prime Minister in the operation theater for what? I don't know, 10, 11 hours. Okay. Dr. Ramakant Panda was the surgeon who operated him, the head surgeon who operated him. And, luckily, as we all know, Dr. Singh went through a successful operation. He's still hale and hearty, quite an old guy, must be close to 90 if I'm not wrong now, 85 or whatever. At that time also in his late 70s and sitting PM. Okay, so imagine Dr. Ramakant Panda, surgery, and if Dr. Manmohan Singh had not survived that surgery, and Dr. Ramakant Panda was a doctor. So the interviewer asks him, how did you do this? This is a sitting PM. Were you not nervous? Were you not worried? Were you not thinking, what if it goes wrong? His answer was, he says, once, we are all in the OP, that there is this bed there. And then at some point in time, the operation theater lights, they come on. And those lights are bright. They're really bright. One of the brightest lights. Like you've seen lights over a billiards table. The lights inside the OT are much, much more brighter than that. He says, when that light comes on, something happens in my head. And after that, I don't know. It's me, that bed in front of me, the OT bed, and the patient, and my work. Who is that patient? Is the patient my relative, the Prime Minister? It's not even there in my mind. I am focused. I am determined. So that Vyavasayatmika buddhi, that determinate buddhi, that single pointed focus, that comes when you do. There's no way that Ayrton Senna and Dr. Ramakant Panda were not doing Buddhi Yoga. They were performing Buddhi Yoga. That is why they were able to do it successfully again and again and again. If you look up Dr. Ramakant Panda, he's done some amazing surgeries, not just on the sitting Prime Minister of India. So they can do it again and again and again. Why? Because they perform Buddhi Yoga. Brilliant, beautiful examples. And when you don't do this, so Bhagavan is now saying, if you do this, you get the single pointedness, you get the Vyavasayatmika. If you don't do it, then you have Bahushakha. Bahushakha means many branched. Shakha means branches. Bahu, many. Bahushakha, many branched. Like a monkey that jumps from branch to branch to branch to branch in a tree, the mind jumps from want to desire to want to desire to want to thought to want to desire. We call it monkey mind actually. Huh? Even in Buddhism, it's called the monkey mind. Bahushakha, Ananta Buddhyo. Endless thoughts. Ananta is endless. Buddhyo here stands for thoughts. Avyava Sainam, of the undetermined. So when you are undetermined, that time endless thoughts make your mind many branched and jumping from one desire to another desire. For example, when we order food from a menu, you are looking at that menu. Every dish, looks very attractive. Should I order this or this? Should I order 1 or 3 or 4 or 5? And you are confused. You go up and down again, and then that waiter is standing with that book, wants to take your order, and you are confused what to order. So the mind is jumping from one branch to another and one item to another item. Or for example, if a spouse, husband and wife, arguing about the TV or the fan, I want the fan in high speed, I want the fan in low speed. Always it will be the opposite, okay? Never, very seldom will you find that both of them want it at the same speed. Okay, or you want the TV in channel 1 or channel 24, okay? But imagine that same spouse, the same husband and wife get a baby. Then the fan speed depends on, I like it high, you like it low, who cares? What does the baby want? Single pointed, determined brain focused entirely on the baby. The baby wants the fan, it will be there. The baby cries when the fan is on, it will be switched off. Whether I'm sweating or not is not point to be considered, okay? So extremely determined. But the same baby grows into a child, 4-year, 5-year, 6-year, get out of here. Go away, quiet. So what happens? The single pointedness wanes off. It wanes away. It goes. Okay? So it is there for a period of time, but it goes away. Among the most powerful emotions, relationships is the relationship of love. Even in love, in the beginning it is, oh, everything for you. My entire life is for you. After some time, what are you doing for me? Okay? Even the lovers start arguing about what you have done. Before, in the initial stages, no, what am I? Everything I do is for you. So even in love, the single pointedness weans off, goes away. There's only one case, there's only one thing in life where it stays forever. And that is when your mind is focused on the higher ideal, on the Lord. When your mind is on the higher ideal, it will be there forever. That Vyavasayatmika will be there forever. So in the next 3 verses, Bhagavan is talking about people. So here what has he told us? He has told us that it is Buddhi Yoga is what we should do. When we perform Buddhi Yoga, the impurities of the mind go away. When we perform Buddhi Yoga, the equanimity sets in. When we perform Buddhi Yoga, the Vyavasayatmika comes in, single pointed, determined. And if we don't, then the Bahushakha, mini branch, mind flittering from here to there, that starts happening. That is what we have seen to now. He now says that there are people who appear very religious. Okay, they may appear religious and they have read the Vedas and they take the prescriptions that are mentioned in the Vedas and they talk about it as if they are the ultimate. But at the same time, they have personal desires and they seek the fruits of what? Fruits of what they are saying the Vedas are prescribing. They seek the fruits from there itself. What about these kind of people? See, the Vedas, it covers everything, okay? It covers everything. It is like a hyper mall, okay? Like a hyper mall that has so many stores and each of those stores has some offering or the other, some prescription or the other for all aspects of life. Whether those are desire prompted or not desire prompted. The Vedas have everything. Buddhi Yoga is also there in the Vedas, and so are these other prescriptions, which have defined fruits. For example, they also say there's something called Soma Yoga. Performers of Soma Yoga live for eternity in everlasting happiness. Okay? Those who eat during solar eclipse will suffer. So tomorrow is solar eclipse, by the way. You are not supposed to eat between, I think, 10:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Okay? It's prescribed. But you have an attached desire. In solar eclipse case, I should not suffer is the desire. In Soma Yoga case, I will live forever joyfully, happily is the desire. So how is it that even though the Vedas prescribe attitudes that are based on selfishness and non-selfishness, where the mind and intellect equipment is single pointed, for somebody else it is fragmented? How is it possible? Is what Bhagavan is covering now in the next 3 verses. So we'll read all 3 verses together.
Yamimam pushpitam vacham
Yamimam pushpitam vacham
pravadantya vipaschitaha
pravadantya vipaschitaha
vedavadarata partha
vedavadarata partha
nanyadastiti vadinaha
nanyadastiti vadinaha
kamatmanasvargapara
kamatmanasvargapara
janma karma falapradam
janma karma falapradam
kriya vishesha bahulam
kriya vishesha bahulam
bhogaishvarya gatim prati
bhogaishvarya gatim prati
भोगैश्वर्य प्रसक्तानां
bhogaishvarya prasaktanam
दयापहृतचेतसां
tayapahritachetasam
व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिः
vyavasayatmika buddhi
समाधौ न विधीयते
samadhau na vidiyate
यामिमां पुष्पितां वाचं प्रवदन्त्य विपश्चितः वेदवादरता पार्थ नान्यदस्तीति वादिनः कामात्मानस्वर्गपरा जन्म कर्म फलप्रदां क्रिया विशेष बहुलां भोगैश्वर्य गतिं प्रति भोगैश्वर्य प्रसक्तानां दयापहृतचेतसां व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते.
So pushpitam, pushpitam means flowery. Pushpitam vacham, flowery speech. Pravadanti means uttering. By who? By the avipaschita. Vipaschita here means wise. Avipaschita is unwise. So flowery speeches uttered by the unwise. Vedavada. Vedavada means the words of the Vedas. The words that are there in the Vedas. Ratha. Ratha means that are artha prompted. Desire prompted. The words in the Vedas which are desire prompted. Partha is obviously O Partha, right? And then it says, so essentially flowery speeches uttered by the unwise who are driven by the desired prompted prescription in the Vedas. And they say that there is nothing else other than that. Nanya dastiti vadinaha. They say that there is nothing else. This is it. This is life. You have to do this. Okay, you have to do Soma Yoga. You can't eat. You have to do this. You know, these are rules. You have to follow. There is nothing else other than this. And then, but what? But they are kamatmana, full of desires. They themselves. Swargapara, having heaven as their own goal. Janma karma falapradam, where they are saying that the actions that you are doing give result in new birth, which is better. The actions that you are doing lead to better birth in future. And what they do by saying this, they vishesha, specific kriya, action. They prescribe specific actions that lead to bhogaishwarya gatim prati, attainment of pleasure and lordship. So full of desire, having heaven as their goal, they utter, flowery words that promise new birth as reward for actions and prescribe various specific actions for attainment of pleasure and lordship. And these people, bhogaishwarya pratyatyanam, of the people who cling to this joy and lordship, taya pahrita chetasam. Pahrita chetasam is whose minds are drawn away by that. By what? By the joy and lordship clinging. These minds and intellect, these buddhi, they are not vyavasayatmika in samadhi. They are not fixated. Vidhiyate is fixated, determined. Vyavasayatmika is determined. When they are meditating. So for those who cling to joy, whose minds are drawn away by, teachings which are associated with desires, and these people, they are not determinate. Their mind and intellect instrument is not resolute when they are focusing, when they are in meditation. So essentially in the last 3 verses, what he's saying is, Bhagavan is teaching is, those people who are full of desires, those who cling to attainment of joy and lordship, those who have heaven as their goal, and those who follow prescriptions of the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas, and they say that that is the ultimate in life. And using that, they utter flowery words, where they say that there is nothing else in life other than this higher birth as reward for your action. While they themselves are drawn towards selfish desires, such people do not have the concentration, the vyavasayatmika determination, and they are not resolute in their meditation. So it's like the vulture that soars up. You see the vulture high up, but the vulture's focus is where? On the carcass that is on the ground. Similarly, however one, like a vulture, however you may be learned on the Vedas, as long as your focus is on the carcass of desires, you will never be able to attain that equanimity. And in this chapter and later on in Karma Yoga, Bhagavan is going to say that you do Karma Yoga, you will attain Brahma Prapti, which is the ultimate goal, Parama Purushartha, which we have read about. Karma Yoga is enough to achieve Parama Purushartha, which is Brahma Prapti. And for that, equanimity is required. And if you have selfish desires, even if you are a master in Vedas, you will not be able to get the equanimity. So if you want to practice Buddhi Yoga, we have to be aware that limitations of life, that is focus on desire prompted actions. So to repeat what I said earlier, if we dedicate our actions to a higher ideal, to the Lord, without any expectations and the complete acceptance, and that leads to determinate and equanimous behavior and mind and intellect that are there, then life will be rewarding and fruitful. Hari Om. With this, we come to the end of today's satsang.
Om asatu ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om purnamada purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Time for comments, questions, thoughts. Looks like today's satsang was really heavy, huh?
Actually, it was very heavy and very deep. It will take some time to, I guess, probably listen to you once again will be helpful.
I would request all of you to please go through the notes, and yeah, it will be really worthwhile going through it once again.
Yeah.
But it's very simple, huh? It's not heavy. It is very simple actually. It all comes down to, Buddhi Yoga, which is dedication to higher ideal, to the Lord. Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, receiving what comes as with equanimity. That is number one. Number two is Vyavasayatmika. When you do Buddhi Yoga, it leads to Vyavasayatmika is determined, focused, single-pointed work, karma that we do. And when we do that, I gave you a lot of examples, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Panda, Ayrton Senna, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal. It leads to, look, think about a cricketer. Sachin Tendulkar is facing Imran Khan. The ball is coming at what, 160 miles? And you hit a beautiful shot. How much of focus is required? And if you do not have that, you are many branched. Baushaka. So it's better to have it. And the final thing we covered today was people who are very knowledgeable about the Vedas because they have read. But at the same time, they are desire prompted. They seek the heavens. They will never be able to have that equanimity. So this is it, what we have done today. But it's very good to go through it.
Yes. I just have one quick question. I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. So Buddhi Yoga is part of Karma Yoga, or is it different, or is it like, is there an overlap? How do we really define that?
No, it is another name for Karma Yoga. Buddhi Yoga is another name for it. It is the same thing.
Okay.
It is exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Karma is action. Karma Yoga is action done with Ishvara Arpana Buddhi, Prasada Buddhi.
Yes.
Because we talk about the Buddhi, then it is also called Buddhi Yoga.
Okay.
Bhagavan Sri Krishna gives it the name Buddhi Yoga. Buddhir yoge tvamam shrinu. I am now going to teach you Buddhi Yoga.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Hi, Srini. I have a question.
Yes, I think there are Aditi.
How would you define Arjuna's karma and karma yoga, or rather differentiate between his karma and karma yoga in the Battle of Kurukshetra?
So, see, Arjuna, till now, where we were, till now the battle has not started. Okay. So, Arjuna came with resolute mindset that he is going to fight the battle, fight the war. Okay. And with that resolute mindset, he orders his charioteer, Sri Krishna, to take the chariot to the middle of the battlefield. Senayo Ubhayor Madhye. Ratam stapayate mucha achyuta. Achyuta is Sri Krishna. So, till then that resolute is there. Till then the Karma Yoga focus is there. Once he gets there, suddenly something happens to him. What happens to him? He looks at the forces. He wanted to look at the forces. He wanted to look at them to do what? To inspect, to see who is going to fight with me, who am I going to kill. That is what he wanted to do. But once he looks at them, he sees fathers, brothers, children, sons, daughters, who are not even there. He sees all of that, relations, my relatives, my people. And that, that sense of I and my, aham and mama, that leads to moha. And that leads to shoka, or vice versa, in whichever order you want to take, right? And then he gets deluded, he gets depressed, he gets sorrowful. He's willing to give up his weapons and he's willing to die. And he says, even if they kill me, I'm not going to fight. That is the state he was in. Then he realizes that there is something wrong. He sees that Bhagavan is not responding. And he sees that Bhagavan is still standing there. He's not taken the Rath and gone away because Arjuna wants to go away. So then he says, looks like I'm deluded. Looks like I have a problem. What is the problem? He realizes that the problem is, Shoka and Moha coming from the, aspect of self-pity, right? Karpanya dosha. And then he requests God and he says, now I'm submitting to you as a student, please teach me. So initially he started off doing his duty and then he abandons his duty. So that initial portion, the very initial portion, a little bit, he was doing Karma Yoga and then he just abandoned. So he was not doing any Karma Yoga, he was just doing Karma, okay? And now once the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is over, then we see, if you read Mahabharata, that determination comes back, okay? That focus comes back, that Swadharma, that desire to do the duty comes back, and he fights the war with that, Karma Yoga attitude, with the Buddhi Yoga attitude. So this period where he gets deluded because of his attachment, because of his personal attachment, that is the place where the yoga part of it has deserted him. Does that answer your question?
But you also said that Karma Yoga, you have no worry, no attachment, no anxiety. So are you saying that throughout the war when he was killing people, he had no anxiety because he was doing Karma Yoga?
That's right. Yes. And if there was any anxiety, he was able to manage it. Obviously, when you see Bhishma, the sage Bhishma lying on the battlefield, there will be emotion, there will be sadness, but that doesn't interfere in the performance of duty. So see, our scriptures do not say that you should steel yourself and let everything that comes from the world bounce off. You have to experience the world. Remember what we talked about, right? We said, what is yoga? Yoga is seeking the higher while maintaining equanimity in the current. So that anxiety is coming at you from outside, but you are maintaining the equanimity in spite of it coming. So the type 1 and type 2 impurities. The type 1 impurities is not in your hands. That will happen all the time. Okay? But if you are facing it with equanimity, then the type 1 impurities do not affect you. If you are not facing it with equanimity, the type 1 impurities affect you. The type 2 impurities come from within. Kama, Lobha, Matsarya, okay, Mada. Yeah. So those are things which we have to get rid of. You get rid of by these prescriptions that God has just given. How do you remove these impurities?
Okay.
That is these two verses. You must go through these two verses again. God gives the prescription to remove type 2 impurities. Type 1 impurities you cannot remove. But if you remove type 2 impurities and your mind becomes stable, type 1 impurities can be dealt with.
Okay. Yeah. One more. You also spoke about detached involvement. Yeah?
Right.
What is the difference between detached involvement and being a saint?
Nothing. A saint is practices detached involvement. A saint does not get attached, but at the same time, a saint lives life, has to face the daily rigmarole of life. So you deal with it. You do yoga, which is focusing on the higher. In fact, we'll come to definition of sannyasa and the two types of sannyasa and all that a little later. I'll not go ahead of myself. We'll come to that. But yes, a saint has to deal with the world, but at the same time he has to seek the higher. And dealing with the world becomes a breeze because of that equanimity. So this is the most important. The sthira buddhi, the sthita pragya, it will come a little later in chapter 2. So when that vyavasayatmika buddhi leads to a person being a sthita pragya. And Arjuna will ask Bhagwan, how is the sthita pragya? Who is this person? Who is this sthita pragya? How is he able to be sthita pragya? How is he able to be stable? So being stable in the face of all pressures while seeking the higher is the key to ultimate happiness.
Okay, thank you.
Srini,
Yes, Anupa.
my question is basically when we are talking about the determination, right? The Karma Yoga and the Buddhi Yoga, can one focus on multiple activities, or can one need to focus on a single activity? So the examples that we have taken, right, be it Federer or be it the doctor, they're focusing on their duty, right? One single activity. For example, if we, maybe the lesser mortals, if we may call ourselves, it's like, should I focus on work? Should I focus on family? Should I focus on something like my passion? So how do we say that, in all the aspects, we have to have the determinations? Is that the message, or is it need to be like one single activity?
See, the fact is that something called multitasking doesn't exist, right? That is a fact. Although we may call things multitasking, when you break down into minute portions of time, when you break down into second and millisecond or whatever, then you are doing one thing at a time. Okay, maybe you are doing one thing 1 second, another thing another second. So for example, Dr. Ramakant Panda is looking at the heart, but at the same time, if there is a blood seeping through, one of the things that happens in almost all surgeries is there is bleeding. Okay, so while he's performing his operation and there is blood all over because it's a surgery and you cut open the person, you also have to be alert towards bleeding that should not be happening, because bleeding that should not be happening can kill the patient in the operation theater. The surgery can go well, but the bleeding somewhere else can kill. So the doctor is operating, but at the same time the doctor is alert. But is it at the same time really? No. When you break down into the multiple, milliseconds or into the seconds or into the half a minute or whatever, it's a sequence of actions. Like people talk to me that sometimes when I'm driving, I text, okay? But I am doing sequence of actions only, right? So what Bhagavan says is, when you do what you are doing, you do it with that dedication to the higher ideal, accept the result, then it will give you the single pointedness. So when you are doing something, the single pointedness comes in, and when the single pointedness comes in, the efficiency of the action improves. So when you do something, do it dedicated to the higher. If things don't go your way, learn to accept it, and you will find that the single pointedness comes in. And life is a sequence of events. Life is not one single event or one single action. So it's a sequence of events. So you will find that you will keep doing the sequence of events with the much better focus. And when you do it with much better focus, you are able to do more things better.
Okay. So focus is the key, basically, right? In that.
Vyavasayatmika.
Right. Okay, sure. Thanks.
Good. If there are no other thoughts, questions, comments, I think we can close for today. Okay, thank you. Hari Om. We'll see you next Saturday.